I'm always addicted to the idea of building something. I think I would have always wondered what if I didn't. Apparently there's zero pressure for it. On paper, it doesn't really make sense.
I saw in a Q&A recently, you mentioned you're always building towards a vision that you have. What is that vision? What is this thing that you're working towards? And I know it's ever changing, but what's that vision that you have as your end goal?
It's a great question. I think I'm kind of always addicted to the idea of like building something, whether that be a personal brand, a company I work for, my own skill set, so on and so forth. And so I don't know exactly. I think someday I would like to build something of my own perhaps, but now I'm in a situation currently where I'm really enjoying like building a brand that I'm with. But it just kind of depends. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to figure out exactly what my vision is, but I think for a long time I wanted to go down a route of being like a personal content guy, like a YouTuber or something like that. But the more people I've followed and the more people I've kind of learned from, it's really cool to see like what they can build with a YouTube channel or any social platform, what they can build with that, you know what I mean? Like what they can use it for, like create a clothing brand or a fitness brand or whatever, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and whenever you go down the road of making your own content, working for a company, would you like, if you got tomorrow 400,000 more subscribers, would you consider going full-time YouTube?
Right now, no, I don't think so, at least not anytime soon. And I think that's probably the first time in however many years I've been doing this, because I've only been doing personal content for, I would say maybe 4 years. I would say more seriously since like COVID happened. So 2.5 years maybe, or whatever that is now. But this, for the first time in my life, like this, I currently work for a company called Ghost, and it very much is a dream job of mine and what I've wanted for years now. So I think at this point I'm a very key role in that company, and I want to continue to keep building that. But the personal content side of things is honestly just, I always call it a passion project. I just have fun with it. And one of the things I love so much about it is like a side hustle or a passion project or whatever. So currently there's zero pressure for it. So if I don't do something, you know, for a week, or I do something every single day for a week, it's just because I want to. So I don't depend on it for a paycheck or a source of anything other than just like an outlet for myself. And I don't know how that would be if that switched, you know what I mean? So someday maybe, but currently I like what I'm doing and I think I'm going to be here for a long time.
What does a typical day look like with the balance between Ghost and your personal?
Balance, I think, is by far the hardest thing of like what I do or what I think a lot of us creators do. A typical day, though, honestly, it's just kind of like a mess. It depends on how much travel, because my current position, I do travel quite a bit. But if I kind of had to give like a general summary, right? Most mornings I wake up, I usually work on something for maybe an hour or so in the morning, like personal before work, go to work, and then do whatever after work, sometimes the gym, sometimes whatever else. And then usually like a few hours before I go to bed is kind of like personal content time again. And this kind of became like my routine, I guess, like during COVID time. And then back in Ohio before I moved to Chicago for this job, I was living with my girlfriend, and we had just kind of like this routine where we'd, you know, hang out, whatever. She's a very early morning person and still is to this day. And I'm a late night person, just that's how it worked. So we'd hang out, do whatever, right? She would go to bed, and then like 9 p.m. I would sit down in the office and get to work on my stuff. And so now it's just kind of second nature. But it's just kind of depends.
Me and my girlfriend are the total opposite, where
Really?
she'll text me at like 4 a.m. good night, and I'm texting her at 11 p.m. good night.
Yeah.
I'm head to bed, and she'll once I tell her good night, she'll have those 5 hours,
Yeah.
4 hours where she'll just crack down, do what she needs to do, but I'll be up earlier.
Yeah, it's funny because especially like with Ghosts, like we do some late night stuff sometimes, like with whatever, if we're in Vegas or I don't know, a club scene thing or whatever, right? There's multiple times where she's waking up at 4 a.m. and like we're still out somewhere or like shooting something or whatever, right? And And so it's just funny, but yeah.
So something in the freelance world and in just working for brands world, which I know you haven't only worked for Ghost, you've worked for Express and Rogue,
Yes.
correct? How do you navigate building your portfolio and making sure that since you have a personal following, how do you make sure that you're not crossing any lines with them or like announcing products too soon or posting too much? How do you float between saying you work for Ghost but not making that your entire brand?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky thing for a lot of people. So a little bit of background for myself. I worked at Rogue Fitness for like about 5 years, like pretty much right out of college, like 1 year out of college. So I was there for a long time, learned a lot of like my major skills and stuff there, I would say. And then I moved to Express, like the clothing company. I was there for a little over 2 years, I think. And that was like, large production scale, like huge shoots. Like we're talking 30 plus people sometimes. The biggest, baddest cameras, huge name photographers, like the biggest stuff, right? And so that was like a very big shock coming from Rogue, which was like at the time at least, like a very up and coming brand, a lot of growing pains, super successful company, but just small. And then by the time I left in 5 years, it was becoming massive. So Express, that was like about 2 years of doing that, which is a super good learning experience, all this stuff. And to be very transparent, COVID happened during that time. And so I was furloughed, which basically means, I didn't know what this word meant, but furloughed is basically you're laid off with the intent of hopefully hiring you back. You still have health insurance, but like you don't have a job anymore. So they take unemployment checks and all that stuff, right? And so during that time, I think a lot of people kind of went two ways during COVID, right? They either went the way of, this is like summer vacation, I'm going to party and have fun or whatever. And I kind of use it as a chance because at that point, I've been like dabbling with a YouTube channel and personal content for maybe like 6 months or something. And I use it as a chance to be like, let's just pretend I'm full time at this thing, right? And let me just see what I can do. And so I was, I don't know how many hours I was working, but like 60 plus hours a week just on like making YouTube content because this was always a dream of mine to see what could happen during that. So I was just taking an unemployment check and working on my personal brand, I guess, and seeing what I could make happen. And I think that I didn't see the craziest like number growth during that time, but I saw a lot of growth like within myself with consistency, all that kind of stuff, whatever. And so during that time, right, I actually got hired back with Express. And at that point, I love that company, a lot of people, and I love a lot of people I worked with, but I kind of use it as a point where it's like, if you put everything into a brand sometimes, like, especially a large brand, that isn't always like a two-way street. And I was like, what if I do get dropped the next day? Or, I basically, when push came to shove, I was like expensible. So I was just like, I feel like I should at least have like a side thing going on. And then so that was kind of my mindset. And it never really was a problem because I loved Express and everything, but it wasn't really like my thing, like, shooting these types of high fashion models and kind of shoots and stuff. It was an awesome learning experience and I loved all the people. It just wasn't like my exact personal taste. You know what I mean?
Do you enjoy the more run and gun style than the high budget, really heavily? I think my personal opinion, I enjoy the heavy production once in a while.
Yeah.
It becomes a lot whenever either it seems like you're doing one project a month.
Yeah.
Or it just, you get so tied up in these minute details. And I like whenever it's create a video, it's out tomorrow. Create a video, it's out tomorrow. Because if you go too far in one direction, I think it gets frustrating.
Yeah. I think you kind of have to keep switching up, right? And so my point with all that, my backstory was saying that once Ghost became a thing, right? Do you want me to dive into that?
Yeah,
story?
absolutely.
Okay, so how Ghost happened was, at this point, I was working at Express. I was building my personal brand, all this stuff. I already loved Ghost products and was using it within my content like I do these days. And so long story short, CJ, who now I'm very good friends with at Ghost, signed me as an athlete. So I was going to be one of the first like creative athletes that Ghost had, which was like dream come true for me, super cool. And it was literally like, the entire point of my personal brand was to like show how creative people do, other things outside just being a creative sitting in a room. And so that was really cool. And then Ryan, who's one of the co-founders, we go like a few years back and he just gave me a call and was like, dude, we need someone like you at Ghost, like you should come move to Chicago and come work here. And so the really cool thing about that is Ghost is very similar to my personal brand and vision, just with how I do stuff, how I would edit stuff, how I would shoot stuff. And so to me, it's very easy, but I am very careful about ever feeling like I'm leveraging work for personal or vice versa, you know what I mean? And so if you look at my personal content, it is like pretty separated. Obviously you see the stuff I do on a day-to-day with my personal brand, but I never ever would want it to feel like I'm doing something for Ghost to just leverage myself or whatever, because it's not. It's totally a separate thing for me. It's just, you know, I obviously also work there.
Are you still considered a Ghost athlete?
No. So that actually literally lasted like a month.
Because you
like
came to work there?
5 weeks because, I came to work there. And then obviously like that doesn't happen and everything. But it was cool that it happened because that was like kind of always my goal with it. And then now it's like turned into way more than I could have imagined. So it is a cool story, but it's just funny how it worked out.
So did you start working in the content world right out of college?
So right out of college, so I went to art school, which is like...
Where did you go to school?
CCAD in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
So Columbus College of Art and Design. And
I heard of it. Actually, I was looking into Savannah College of Art and Design.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at lists of art and design schools, and that was one of them.
Well, it's funny because, you know, I feel like every art institute does this where they're like, oh, we're the 5th ranked art school in the country. I'm like, are you? Like, sure, right?
Yeah. What list? You can find some publication to put you 2 on the list.
I know. So, I went there. And then I did what like everyone does, thinks they need to move to LA, like right after like film school to like go make movies. And so I went out to like LA. I lived in like Ventura, which is like an hour north, and just like freelance with some guys out there that were like working on films and like other stuff, whatever. And then it was okay. I think it was just, I needed to see that. And then I got an awesome job offer back in Ohio at Rogue, actually, just because I had a connection there. So I moved back and I wanted some stability. So
how was your experience out in LA whenever you went there for a little bit?
It was cool, but honestly, it wasn't like the best experience for myself personally. I think I made a lot of cool connections and I'm really glad I did that. So I think I would have always wondered what if I didn't. But personally for myself, it just made more sense to go back home and have like a stable income and like kind of know what I was doing. But you know,
yeah, because that was something that whenever I was in film school, same kind of thing. I was like, I need to move to LA after I'm done and do it. And I ended up dropping out of film school, doing things in Chicago for a little bit. And reflecting on it, I never ended up moving to LA, but I realized that the only reason I thought I needed to move to LA is because I couldn't make a living anywhere else. Right. And I quickly proved myself wrong with that. And I think that's part of the reason that everybody's like, I got to get out there.
Well, and especially like, you know, like I'm not old, but like I'm 31. And like in 2014, it felt even more so like LA was the place if you want to be like in art, you know what I mean? Or especially like film. You'd be LA or New York and like that was it. I would say in the last couple years now, I feel like there's more realization that people can kind of do whatever anywhere.
I think also we're talking about how people went in separate directions during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was DMs before that, but it really brought everything together where every company was on Zoom and everything. So everybody was forced to work remote, even if that person lived 5 minutes from them.
Totally.
So it opened up the doors even more for you to connect with the people in LA, even if you didn't. And that's something that happened for me. Some of these people I really looked up to, I started to work with them because they were just adapting to the times.
Well, and like the remote world like changed everything for like everyone. You know what I mean? Like so much now, you know, there's so many like remote editors or just producers or even any sort of job, right? And it changed so much. But
whenever you started in YouTube, whenever you were furloughed, did you have any kind of base? Did you have any videos that you made just one-off and then didn't stick with it? Or was this the first time you ever even made a YouTube video?
No, at that point, I forget how many I'd made at that point, but it was quite a few, but none of them had like really any traction. But I've always kind of been in like the camera tech lifestyle space. Like people like Peter McKinnon was like my biggest inspiration, which I feel like anyone in our field like knows he's like one of the GOATs. Him, Casey, like all those guys. But I just was basically starting doing reviews on things I owned, whether it be camera gear or lenses or computers or whatever, because those things are things that I'm passionate about or interested in already, and it just kind of made sense, and I just would kind of like build off of that.
Was the fitness and kind of implementing, supplements or different things, did that come later in your journey of YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, like even now it's not like the biggest part, but it's just a big part of like my personal lifestyle. And so I think that's always going back to, again, like this not being what I do for a paycheck. I think for a long time, like YouTubers can go two different ways. They can either really niche down and like do one specific types of videos. Like if I did just camera reviews, I'd be at 100K already. But like personally, that's not fun. And especially like I don't care to only do it for growth. So I've just decided to like include whatever I wanted into it. So I might watch someone doing a morning routine video, and I want to do that for my own. And that might not help the algorithm as much as if I just did Sony camera reviews over and over and over. But to me, like that's not my focus. It's just growth. It's just I want to be interested in what I'm creating.
Yeah, and I think the people that are bigger, and we talked about like Peter McKinnon, I think the reason a lot of people attach to him is because if you think about his videos, it's not all cameras. You know his other little hobbies that he's into. So finding that little in between there where having a thing, which yours is cameras, tech, but also implementing your other hobbies is important because I think it humanizes you a little bit.
Well, and like there's a reason why, I mean, if people know of him, they know what I'm talking about. But like there was a whole wave of 1 or 2 years where every single person was making coffee in their YouTube videos. And it's like there's no... that's not a coincidence. It's because he made that part of like his brand where it's just, you see someone doing that and you're like, oh, that's Peter. And that honestly is funny enough. One of the reasons why I always started including like energy drinks and stuff like that in my content. And this was before like Ghost Energy was even a thing. I would use like brands like 3D and stuff because it's generally what I was drinking while I was working and stuff. And it became a thing where it's like every video, it's like, oh, what flavor am I drinking that day or whatever. And it almost becomes like a character to like my content, as much as like my office is a character to me, it's like what I'm drinking or what I'm doing, or maybe it could be what your workout is that day or whatever, right?
Yeah, you just dropped your new Lightroom presets, and you share people that are sharing it with you, and the amount of people that'll send you a story of a ghost can with
crazy.
Your preset is pretty damn cool. And go watch it or go buy his presets, of course.
Yeah.
But another person that does that well, I don't know if you've ever seen his stuff, Jack Cook. He's big on TikTok. He does like a daily vlog.
Yep,
he has the yerba mates.
Yeah, can't forget the Bev.
And it's so good though.
He's
and
awesome.
Constantly he'll be getting tagged in photos of people drinking them on a shoot, drinking them wherever, but it's one more way for people to connect to you.
Yep.
And that's not your merch, but it feels like, oh, I really like this YouTuber and I can have this thing that he has and it feels special then.
Well, and it's just like you go to the grocery store, you go to the gas station or whatever, and you see something, you're like, it just makes you think of that person. Not as like that's the goal, right? But it just becomes more of like, I guess, a community, right? And I think that's the biggest goal for me with any of this stuff is it's less about like growth just to see numbers and stuff or whatever. And I think that also is a benefit of being less niche down is like just making stuff about whatever you want to a certain degree, right? That people really start enjoying you more than just like what you're talking about. And so whatever you're doing, whether it be drinking something or where you go every day or your office or whatever it is, right? Like people know you for that stuff instead of just everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you want to be known for your personality too.
Yeah.
You could make like you said, you could make tutorials and camera reviews every single day and your channel would probably grow.
Probably.
But when it came to, if you wanted to release a brand, say I know you're in the clothing. If you want to release a clothing brand, if you only are the person that teaches tutorials, you're going to have a lot harder time selling anything. Yeah. Because they don't necessarily care about you. They just care about what you're going to teach them.
Totally.
And the people that I really like, they have the real life feel to it. And that's what I really enjoy.
Well, it's funny. I was having a conversation recently with one of my friends, Rob, and we were talking about, like the benefits of like your first piece of content not blowing up. Because let's say your very first TikTok or Instagram reel or whatever blows up, right? And it's about my my camera or a camera review, right? You're going to be really afraid for that second video to not be a camera review video, or especially like your fourth, fifth, whatever. And it's like, how many times can you review that or do a different thing or whatever? And so I think it's one of the things where I say is, because I've been doing YouTube for, let's say, 3.5 years or something now. And I think I've published like 170 long form videos. And I'm only at like coming up on 24,000 subscribers, which to me, that's pretty low for the amount of time I put into it. But something really cool about that, which I think is the strength, is the people that have chose to stick around are sticking around because of me and less about what I am talking about. And so if you look at my numbers compared to someone with 100K, the numbers are very comparable between views or comments, especially comments, engagement, all that kind of stuff is drastically higher. I always say like I hit above my weight class in numbers because the community is strong. So I think like not having your first piece of content blow up is actually really important sometimes.
I think it's important at the same time where if you make a video that you don't really enjoy making, but it's good, you're going to feel obligated to make that over and over and over again. I even got a taste of this where I post a lot of my behind the scenes NFL videos and then I post something else and that doesn't do nearly as well, especially on TikTok. Doesn't do anywhere as well. But I know I have to stay to that because I am trying to build a personal brand at the same time. I'm not trying to only have a following because I have my cool NFL photos of these people's favorite players in the world.
Well, are you familiar with the YouTuber Sarah Dietschy?
I've heard the name before.
So she's like one of like the top people in like the tech space, I would say. And she made a video years back, which I've always kind of remember in the back of my head, but she always said, she was going crazy with her videos. So what she ended up doing was making this rule where she created one piece of content for yourself, then one piece of content for the viewer. And she said, otherwise you just start going crazy. And she said, your numbers might be hit a little bit or whatever, but the fact that you can like keep yourself sane by like keeping like a video about whatever you are interested in about that week or month, whatever, like that's the rule she made. And so I always like try to kind of do that to a sense. Like if you look at my Instagram page, for example, my office is probably the reason for most of my growth, just how it looks, the stuff I do in it, whatever, right? But if that was all I did, I would be so afraid to ever post anything else. And it's just not as fun then, right? But like I'm also smart that like I need to somewhat include that to like keep a growth, but also like make it about myself and my other interests as well.
Yeah, your office is something that people are constantly talking
I know, it's
about.
like whenever I see someone in person, they're like, well, yo, your office is sick.
Yeah, it's like, and that's like, I'll talk to somebody and they're like, or I showed somebody my YouTube channel recently, and it's also, it makes you feel great because you might be intentionally trying to be like, this is my office. Everybody somebody sees a thumbnail, has your office, and they're like, oh yeah, I've seen that guy before. And recently I've been putting greens into my thumbnails and people are like, oh, it's clearly you have an aesthetic. So no matter what the video is, if you see that certain style, that's the person's content.
Totally. And something I implemented like about a year ago, actually, more and more was like, obviously I'm very big into sneakers and these days that's pretty apparent. But I think for a long time, I was afraid to include that in my content like much at all because on paper it doesn't really make sense. Like you're mixing like camera gear and MacBooks with like talking about what sneaker you bought. I'm like, that doesn't make sense, right? But quickly I found out like a year ago, I was just like, you know what? Screw it, I'm just gonna start talking about more things I want to, or if I get a cool pair of shoes, I'm gonna post photos or an Instagram reel or whatever, right? And at this point, it's just naturally kind of ingrained into my content. And it's surprising how many people are into both of those things, like tech stuff, and then also like sneakers. And so I'm not saying like I'm the first person to ever do that, right? But like, it's definitely part of my content, what makes me me. And I think that's a big reason why people stick around. Because if people find a page that's just like a cool office, there's tens of thousands of other people doing that same thing. But if they see a cool office, like with a cool pair of kicks that like someone knows, that might be the reason that they stay.